Right, hello everybody, and welcome back. I am still without a mic, but not to worry, that should be rectified soon. So, I've been wanting to do a follow-up video with talking about Restore Britain and its position with like Sir Charlie Downs and others, talk about the foundational principles of Britain, Christianity, and some of the back and forth that's been going on. But before I could do that, um, all this conflict and war stuff happened, and as I was unable to stream as well for other reasons as well. So it didn't really feel, at the time that this was the right point, and I thought, well, I'll let this one. I'll come back to it the following week, and it's a good thing I did because I've seen over the last day or so is an intervention by what some people refer to as the Thiel network. Um, and it's a network of people who are funded by Peter Thiel, who are, um, you know, some explicitly, some not so. We'll get into those. And there's been like this attack or not so much, I mean, some ways attacks, but just counter signaling Restore in favor of Reform UK. And this is this has sort of become part of the story because particularly they've been targeting the likes of Charlie Downs and I think Carl Benjamin of the Lotus Eaters, known as Sargon, has also been targeted by that sort of people, those people in that network and counter signaled and what have you. So this is the story that's evolved from this. So just to give a sort of point of clarity here, a few weeks ago, Charlie Downs went and did the media circuit along with was Pitt Harrington, who I don't know too well, and a few others in Restore, and they've been sort of talking about the essence of what makes a British person on a sort of cultural and civilizational level, beyond the aspect of just genetics of the and ethnicity, um, which is something when they sort of brought it up, likes of Ben Habib, people in Advance UK, and um, a few other people in that sort of Civnat, more prone to prone to um, sort of silly outbursts types of people, got a bit mad about. In fact, I say got it's a bit of an understatement with Ben Habib. He had a full-on crash out um, online, and just sort of exposed himself as just a disaffected liberal. Like most all these people, in reality, are just disaffected liberals who, when challenged, when confronted with the actual radical change that is needed, fold and then just retreat back into, the worst aspects of the modern world. They're just liberals that just don't like how things are going, but haven't got the mental or even the desire to do anything about it. And they can't run off to Dubai anymore. They can't run off to um, Abu Dhabi or Dubai, the Gulf countries. They can't run away there, and um, anyway, that's a separate matter. So Charlie Downs, he'd been doing the rounds and everything, and this did cause a bit of conversations because, of course, in our circles, we have people who are maybe slightly more Nietzschean, right-wing types, neo-pagans, maybe even atheists. Who knows? Who weren't necessarily in agreement with Charlie's statement that Christianity being in Britain is the foundation, is the foundation and should be that going forward. And this caused a bit of back and throw, and but largely there was. I mean, you had like Survive the Jive and others, but in some sort of way, I think with the more reasonable types like Survive the Jive and others, they were able to understand, I guess, on the from the historical point of view and the, um, there wasn't any sort of mad coping or any sort of what would you call it, Motte and Bailey arguments, straw manning arguments to counter signal that that proposition by uh, Charlie and Co. is a factual truth that there is foundation of England was by a Christian monarch. The um, conversions of the English people was largely down to, apart from direct missionaries from Rome, it was largely down to the Celtic populations, which of West Britain, Ireland, and so on. Which so that there is a truth to that, and you could get into the arguments of Christianity. I mean, as I stated before, I think as a um, as a concept which was fermented and matured within the Roman Empire in the Mediterranean basin and in the particularly in the Greco world, I think it is a European um, religion more so than purely an Eastern one. Though there will be people disagreeing with that statement, but there you go. That's my perception of it. And so um, that seemed to be, a settled one. You had like the usual whataboutisms or drawing to the most extreme examples or the most sort of rare examples, saying, well, can you be if you're not a Christian, then are you British? These sorts of things. And I do think there is a problem in the framing of the argument itself, because at the end of the day, no, you can like if you take, say, Survive to Jive, Thomas Rousel, the fact that he's a neo-pagan and isn't a Christian, does that make him non-English? No, it doesn't. Is he a representative of the majority of English people? No, he isn't. He is a minority, but that doesn't change the fact that being one's faith in that regard doesn't determine one's um, qualification of actually like a cultural identity. Now, strictly speaking, in history, yes, um, ethnicity, tribe, race, and culture is all amalgamates into one. One's religion reflects one's ethnicity. That is the nature of paganism. The pagan pantheons of each group. It represents the understanding and perception of the world from their own group. That's how. Hence, the Germanic pantheon, comparing it to Baltic or uh, Celtic or Gallic or what have you, or even the Roman one. But I think the Roman one is more imperial, so there's a different dynamic to that. Um, but this sort of debate sort of evolved from this back and forth. And one thing I noticed, and I've noticed this with Restore for the last since its actual forming as a party, is all criticism and all pushback has been entirely from commentators and people nominally on the right. Now, I'm speaking as, of course, from the layman, the average layman's perception of the political spectrum. So normally the right, GB News, maybe like Talk TV, Julie Hartley Brewer types. It's been people on the quote unquote right side. And what's quite interesting is a lot of those on the left haven't actually engaged. And I don't just mean their commentators or their talking heads, I mean even down to the individual accounts. They don't even talk about it. They're still, tweeting about how Farage is bringing in, the next, the British Third Reich or something. So that's something I've noted, and it's quite interesting to, that it's still the case to this day. And this is something you see in a lot of the containment operations in the UK. Um, I think I can't remember who coined the term, but there is like what they call the crowding out, where Restore is being crowded out from the public. Um, you know, I guess you see being crowded out from the uh, public, the wider public, from the right, as a form to contain them and basically just wither them down. Um, and you saw a bit of this with Homeland, but there was a self destruction there anyhow. So this is something that I've noticed. You don't see like a Labour activist or a Labour member or some Green Party stan or I mean the average Green Party um, supporter and social commentator, even the more rando types, the smaller ones, for them, in their mind, they're locked into this great struggle between ideological struggle between them and Farage. Um, that's their perception of what the political reality is, and that the far right. And bearing in mind they're so paranoid about the far right and obsessive over the rise of far right and the needs to defeat it. They're quite ignorant of what restore represents because, from their point of view, that would be the sort of truest form of far right politics. So haven't seen anyone comment on it. The only one I have seen today is Aaron Bastani, and he's been somewhat he didn't sort of spurg out or anything. He was actually quite favourable in some regards on policies. I think it was over in war intervention and everything, and we'll get into that as well. So what has happened in the last 24, 48 hours is that, and I'll just bring this up. So just this is a recording, everyone. So I could probably pause this and sort of do it, but I cannot be asked. So here we go. So this was a tweet that I saw, and this may not be the start of it, but this is one that I've noted, is Charlie Downs. Okay. So in November, 30th of November 2025, so last year, uh, he puts out a tweet that saying England is getting what she deserves. Let me say that again. England is getting what she deserves. It's not globalists, it's not elites, it's not the foreigners, and it is us. And then he goes into a long um, uh, tweet, sort of saying what the degraded nature of the English and the British person, the individual, the atomized, the you know um, corrupted with modernity, and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so we understand that, and this is something I've talked about. I've talked with Iron Duke and everything, that that the the problem with this country is that we have become too soft. Our people and European man has become too soft. We have no vigor, no sort of drive anymore. Nobody really thinks in long-term civilizational aims, even on a political level. Everything is conceived of every 5 years. We don't think long term, but also we don't hold anything really sacred anymore. You know, we don't hold anything to high regard anymore. And so I think that the while it may anger a few people, and this is where it will go on to, because of course this will be talk about the rape gangs and stuff. We can't hold. I mean, it would be inappropriate, and I've criticized an American cartoonist to suggest this, that on an individual level, that they're like attacking the parents or anything on the rape gangs or something. There is a wider institutional level where you had people from our own group who allowed this to happen. You had people locally in the wake of this who would vote for the parties that allowed this to happen, helped cover it up, and even joined in it. And so, on a collective basis, yeah, there is something wrong with the British people. That there is something deeply, deeply wrong, and it's because of, I believe, a great deal of psychological warfare over generations. I mean, you're looking at 2 or 3 generations at this point, where it stems from liberalism, it stems from maybe a form of guilt, and it also stems from this desire to keep to fight the eternal enemy of fascism, and then that's one of the way that um, particularly many progressives view the world and speak out against this. Effectively, it has great social well, it has a form of social consequences which people don't want to go there. They just don't. And so I think, on a pure realistic level, yeah, because the radical change that is needed, it's not changing about the economic outlook of this country. It's not changing policy or something like that. Because you could have like the based government everyone wants. But the thing though is everybody is happy with porn. Everybody is happy with the boom and bust economy that's set up where everything is cheap on debt. People want to go on holiday cheap. People want to have all these nice luxuries. People want to watch Netflix. And in some ways, you while you can't fight it, I mean, you can't go. You're not going to have success banning all this or stopping all this. But what you can do is you can actually take the wheel of state, the reins of state itself, and actually wield some power of direction. And that's what's been missing in this country for a long time. You need to have, you basically need to have head, that head of governance again, which we don't have. We don't have it in this type of system or this regime. And the trouble is, it is completely designed to disprivilege us. It is entirely designed to disprivilege those who have a traditional lens, who are British, who are English, and who are proud, and also want to um, display our sense of courage and duty, and also devotion to this country. All of that is in completely at odds with what governs us today, and it would be totally condemned by I mean, not just those on the left, but most people on the right. It has been, in fact, it has been condemned time and time again when people have stood, you know, and promoted this sort of way of thinking, have been totally condemned as lunatics, as madmen, and as dangerous individuals. So this was the tweet, and I agree with the sentiment from this. I think it needs to be said, because the reason why Matt Goodwin, I mean, Matt Goodwin as well, you can criticize foreign nationals, but at the end of the day, they're just some low paid slave that some multinational company, FTSE 100 company, has lobbied the government think tank, or lobby some sort of political party to import into this country. I mean, I think one thing that needs to be looked at, I mean, the ire can't be at the individual level of some foreign migrant that's important in this country. It has to be at the companies, um, and the boards and the CEOs of individuals who are pushing for this. they always seem to get off scot-free. They're the ones that have completely screwed the labour pool in in this country, and also completely screwed up the working conditions in this country as well. But that's a separate matter. So anyway, let's just. I will go to. Let's go to the. Hold on a sec. Yes, so going back to the main response from this, so here you have Bronze Age pervert. Now he is someone who I've looked into previously, and I've you know listened to a couple of his Caribbean rhythm streams, what have you, podcasts, and also read a bit of Bronze Age mindset. Now, um, this is his. Quite frankly, I find nothing of value in really any of it, to be honest. Um, and that's even before knowing about his connection to all this network anyway. So this is his response. Extremely wrong and malicious screed, and in the wake of the tyrant of lockdowns and ongoing mass state and social repression to run on young white men have too much freedom is dead on arrival as a political movement. And the thing though is, what's quite funny is Danny Kruger, who was a Reform MP, and as academic agent rightly points out, um, he did an interview talk about this. So this has already been spoken. I mean, Danny Kruger sort of presents himself as this, uh, this great evangelical Christian type philosopher esque persona, um, when he isn't, calling for the integration of new British Afghanis who arrived 2 seconds ago. So, this sort of criticism coming from the likes of these people is a bit hollow. Bearing in mind this was, you know, this is something that has been talked about by people on, on the reform side, and even on other political, persuasions as well. But the thing though is, you can have this sense of freedom, you can have this sense of power and stuff. But the problem is, and this is what Charlie and others were getting to the heart of, is it's about duty. It's about masculinity. I mean, it's not about sunning one's ballsack or larping as some Bronze Age warlord or something, because that's just complete and utter clownish, childish, naive behavior. This is about uh actually embracing, and this isn't about sort of England, maybe the European virtue or thing, but it's about embracing some sort of intellectual level of critical thinking, of masculinity, a sense of duty, purpose. And look, you know saying stuff which is tough, saying stuff which may come across as illiberal, because all this screams to me is you're just crying that it sounds illiberal. Well, yeah, it is a liberal because we are illiberal. We promote illiberalism because liberalism is why we're here in the first place. Um, Stands to reason, I think. Right. So here we have also another bit. So this was a bit of a follow-up one, or from a more so this was one that I think quite a few of us have seen. And this is below um this is uh, Charlie. Sorry, I forgot his name. But I was thinking of Downs, but I didn't want to use that. This is Charlie, um, and he was having this conversation with, I guess, a bunch of sort of Muslim types. I don't know. And um, he sort of saying that he agrees with he saw one thing he this was it. This was on that former GB News presenter, Sun columnist on the left there, and he was saying that he actually somewhat agrees with the sort of vanguardist nature of the Muslims in this country, that they are, they reject liberalism, they reject sort of this sort of social moral decay, which I don't entirely believe. There is some accounts, there's some reporting that, when you have people from these tribalistic Islamic traditionalist societies that arrive in Britain, that their children there tends to be some that end up on a generation, maybe like a second, third generational level, sort of tend to embrace, the more corrupt side of liberalism, but it sort of varies. I do wonder, because you see particularly more as younger, there was a whole thing in the early 2000s how there wasn't integration. A lot of you have maybe on the more extreme ends some that that go integrate into liberal progressive um, society, and into the degeneracy, as you could call it, and then some revert to more very traditional extreme versions of their own tribalistic societies, like we see on the screen here, with the garments and what have you, and maybe that even contemporary people in, say, Pakistan or something would find very conservative and very extreme. And this is just like the counterbalance of like on of the individual. Um, if you're more programmed to be more traditionalist, you would go in that area, and vice versa. You don't have that much in between. But regardless, that was something that Charlie was saying, that he sort of respected, and maybe admired slightly the nature of how they're able to combat it, and on a purely community level. And it's um Bronze Age pervert again responds here. Just still a job. This is the great thing to associate with immigration restriction. Makes things really clear. Broad appeal to all who just want migration restriction. Just top class political instincts, congratulations. You're on the way to victory. And he then goes on to say below, I know many UK influencers have been courted with memes and promises, and you want deportations and think you're being politically wise to scare reform, but maybe you should have paid attention to what people running Restore actually so what actually say and believe. It's not immigration party. And you have like this is at the crux of the counter jihad sort of stuff. So you're pulling on the strings of the most lowest information person on our side, quite frankly, that red rag to a bull, Islam, it's something which activates that part of the brain. And there have been some who probably didn't understand it. I think most have been, wise enough to understand what he is saying. That it isn't. Uh, he doesn't want it, but he looks at the vanguardist nature of it, and he can respect it, and maybe even want to utilize some of that in Britain. But the fact of the matter is, as he and many they've all said, they are foreign. They are foreign, and they don't integrate. We don't want them to integrate. They don't integrate anyway, so it doesn't matter what we want. It just has not happened. It's been what, 60 years, 60, 70 years. It hasn't happened. It won't happen. And what it does, you have then ever growing ghettos out, what would we call ghettos, but enclaves, where um they are these sort of growing enclaves of foreign nationals of other nations forming in this country. That is the crux of it. And bearing in mind, rewind, why did BAP come out and say, why criticize Farage? when he did that interview over a year ago, where he said, "Oh, we have to accept that Islam is going to be the growing dominant, force, and that we're going to have to appeal to the Islamic vote." I didn't hear Bap say anything then. Him and a lot of the other people were pretty silent on that account. So why? And also, I mean, not to be funny here, but why is BAP even taking interest in this? I would say currently at the moment, a lot of Restore and particularly like this sorts of the podcast stuff is quite niche. They are a small party. They're not really that well known. I mean, I think they're quite well known um, within parts of this country, but on a wider scale, on a global scale, they're not that well known outside just people into the you know political machinations of Twitter politics and stuff. They're not that well known. Rupert is not that well known. I think he had a bit of he's more recently with types of Asmongold and others. He's had a bit more of a expose, you could say, but apart from that, they're not that well known. So it's kind of odd that this has become a thing. And we'll move on now to the likes of Curtis Yarvin. And so this is from Curtis Yarvin. Now we all remember him. He is probably he is being described as Peter Thiel's sort of like house philosopher or what have you, and key part of the Thiel network and of the what was, if we all remember from what 5, 6, probably even longer actually now, years ago, 10 years ago, the neo-reactionary types. So this is his intervention here. Restore, reform, must form compact to A, maintain cordon sanitaire against all uniparties, B, non-compete in all seats, training candidates to step aside. Then it's just personal, which is fine. And this is ridiculous because number one, as it's been, reform is part of the Union Party. They have been flooded by Conservative MPs, failed Conservative MPs, but not just failed ones, the people who actually instituted um, Boris Wave, most of the god awful policies that came from that time period, and are the most rabid, Zionistic lunatics that exist within the Tory party, and they've gone over to reform. And not to mention, as another added bonus to all this, they were the most prevalent sort of attention seeking idiots when it came to their, the sort of drama that existed daily. If we all remember back to what it was like before, the daily drama, the daily political machination. This wasn't just journalists picking up; they were all leaking to the journalists about each other and trying to one up each other. These people don't care about, say, actual changing this country or helping this country or restoring Britain or anything about sort of breaking the uh, changing anything in the system, because for them this is just one big theatre for them. And again, this has been coordinated. This has been coordinated condemnations by the Thiel network, which um, goes to show, this is where reform, the reform backing, and I might do a separate video on this, but reform has definitely had, and it's definitely in receipt of, a lot of media backing, particularly when it came to their Iran stuff. And so we'll talk when we talk about that at a different point. So yeah, academic agent there said nonsense take, uniparty. Melanie Woes as well, just saying this is subverting. Nomos event, stupid or lying. Yeah, again pointing out Robert Jenrick and his you know, the reform. I mean, Jenrick is now pretty much the reform's second in command. near enough. And then some have even suggested that he will be taking over from Farage. So that is on the table as well. Um, you know, you know. Oh, it's so crazy. Why are the British people? Why are the British people? Why are the British right not getting behind these guys? It's so mental. I mean, do you know what makes me? Do you know what's more like frustrating is these guys are meant to be deep-rooted thinkers, philosophers. I mean, okay, yeah, I get that, and you're paid shills. I get that as well. But come on, guys, come on. You have to admit that the propaganda here is very lackluster, and that's why people aren't buying into it. And sort of like digging yourself into this trench of shit and cope piled on even more shit and cope just makes you look ridiculous, quite frankly, and come out with these nonsensical sort of takes, it's like standing aside and everything. I mean, look, the split in the vote stuff has been proven time and again. It doesn't matter. Labour won a general election with a ridiculous majority on what was it, like 30%? Doesn't matter. In fact, you could argue the left wing vote in this country is split far more than anyone else. Now reforming, you know, they've already been honest, and they haven't been that honest as well, which makes it quite entertaining. One week they were the most hawkish people on the run. Now they've sort of got behind Starmer because they've realised it's not a very popular move. And that's not to mention the curse of Trump. I don't mean, the traditional curse of Trump, but the actual curse of backing Trump, right wing movements and parties backing Trump, and then appearing to be traitors to their own people, because that you have this chauvinistic leader who is, um, you know, sort of like this complete like mad emperor, sort of mad emperor maxing, um, and ends up humiliating other countries. And if you're a political party in that country and you are, appearing to, replicate MAGA, it has a negative impact. Look at Canada. Look at the Conservatives there when they lost to Mark Carney. Similar thing, and that was over the 51st state stuff. And reform is going that way, though that they have done this, emergency U-turn where they did this stunt yesterday or day before, I think it was yesterday or something like that, outside of a petrol station where they were showing how they were attacking Labour on the rise of fuel duty or something like that. And even then went on to say that they were against war with Iran, and that it was, they agreed with the defensive, only for defensive means, and even wearing a farmer. He dumped the suits, and they're wearing like the farmer's jacket and everything. So yeah, you know, this isn't a coincidence, though. All of these things, because they see what's going. They all see that there is no momentum. There is momentum, though, not with their bullshit. There is momentum here with low and everything. Now, and look, I know there'll be people that saying that this is just the momentum doesn't mean shit, because it, fall for it again award, it can still be brought down, and it could do. I don't know. That's perfectly likely. It could happen, but at the same time, you know these people, you've had Advanced UK and Ben Habib types. You've had Tommy and his lot somewhat crowded out, and these people being crowded out. That's that's good enough for me at this stage. It's good enough for me because, quite frankly, you know, there is so much social cancer at the moment in this country and on the right. People who claim to be on the right of this country, the most superficial, smug fuckers on the planet, and quite frankly, the fact that they're having to get global foreign types, like we see here, having to jump in and help fight battles, just goes to show that um, you know this is something that they fear, and we must continue with it. We must continue the course wherever it leads us. And as I said, look, with Restore, you're going to see, you know, a you're going to see a black supporter, you're going to see a Muslim, or you're going to see some foreign ethnic minority in the party as maybe like an old councillor or running as an MP, because that's just how the system works. We can't. The BNP had this problem as well. That's how the laws are set up. But it's who you have at the center of the party is what counts. And these people, if they were at the center, or whenever these people get into the center, it's over. But they're not, and that is what counts the most. And on that note, thank you, everyone, and I'll see you next time.